Excellent, excellent. So we're coming up at 2:01 here at in the Eastern time zone. So I think we are going to go ahead and get started. I know that some people will continue to filter in, but that is fine. My name is James Bauman. I'm the Director of Publications for ACUHO-I and also serve as the editor of the Talking Stick. Very happy today that we're going to sort of build upon one of the stories, or a couple stories that we had in the latest issue of the magazine. We're joined by Jennifer Eidum and Lara Lomicka. They're the editors of a new book called The Faculty Factor. In the Talking Stick, we did a quick little interview with them and were able to run an excerpt from it as well. We're also joined by Keeyana Talley from UNC-Greensboro. And along with her professional responsibilities, she also serves as one of the leaders of ACUHO-I's Academic Initiatives Committee. So she is a logical choice to be a part of our panel today, and she will be serving as our moderator. And I would be completely remiss not to remind you that I believe the call for programs is still open for our Academic Initiatives Conference coming up in October. So hopefully some of you have already submitted for that, or if not, Keeyana will certainly accommodate you and make that a reality. This is a really exciting chance for us to have this conversation, because I think what Jennifer and Lara have done with this book is very novel, in that they have taken the academic initiatives and living learning communities, which as ACUHO-I members, we certainly always think of from the housing point of view, and they've turned it around, and we get a chance to hear from faculty members, to hear what their experience is like, what they look to take from these partnerships, and what can be done to make them all the more successful. So with all that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Keeyana, Jennifer, and Lara to further introduce themselves and get started with some questions.
Thank you so much, y'all. Again, my name is Keeyana Talley, and I serve as the Assistant Director for Residence Life for Academic Initiatives and Experiential Learning at UNC-Greensboro. And it is a privilege and an honor to be able to interview Lara and Jennifer, the co-editors of The Faculty Factor. So to kick off, I would love to have you all share. Can you tell us a little bit about this project, and what inspired both of you to kickstart this book?
Well, I think I'll go ahead and start with this question. So Jennifer and I met, to give you a little bit of a background, we met at a summer research institute at Elon's Center for Engaged Learning about probably 5 years ago. And we immediately connected because we were both faculty members with kind of the unique position of living on campus in residence with students. We ended up in the same group, and we just started on a research project together with a few other group members. And so we just realized we had a lot in common. And throughout our research experience, we really, we kind of took a deeper dive into the literature that was completely unrelated to fields of study that we normally work in. I'm in applied linguistics, and Jennifer's in rhetoric work. And so we kind of immersed ourselves in this new body of literature, and we just really felt like there was a gap in looking closer at the faculty perspective, and kind of looking at some different aspects of that within the residential life and living and learning communities. And so I think, to answer your question, our vision is kind of threefold. First, we wanted to really encourage faculty to get engaged and to get involved in living and learning communities. The research has documented well that faculty members are important contributors to living and learning communities. But in this book, we really wanted to explore more of the how of their involvement and their engagement by bringing the faculty voice to the forefront. So no matter really what your family situation is, if you're single, if you have partners, families, pets, if you're multi-generational, I think as faculty members, you can find very creative ways to do life with the students. So for example, right after we moved in residence, my third grader at the time had a school project, and she had to do an altruism project. And I thought, well, normally if we were at our residence at home in our neighborhood, we'd probably set up a lemonade stand and get this project knocked out. But we weren't there. We were in the middle of a campus, living among 230 students. So, how are we going to rethink this and kind of fit this into where we're at the moment? And so we recruited some students and residents. We got the supplies and we decided to bake cookies and cakes and pies together. And we had a little bake sale. And so this is our community kitchen. And my daughter, who was 8 at the time, worked with students, and they were baking up a storm and trying to, get everything ready for the bake sale. And then we donated all the proceeds to a local animal shelter. So, really the first part of our vision is engagement and involvement, and how do we do that as faculty members? I think the second piece of the vision for this book really involves collaboration and the development of partnerships with housing, with dining, with student, and academic affairs. And I think maybe a key ingredient to any successful partnership is good communication. And so as a French professor, I had recently co-taught a short-term study abroad to Paris, where we did a lot of different tastings, and we had opportunities to work with chefs and go and visit restaurants and things over in Paris. And so I came back from that and I thought, well, how can I kind of incorporate my love for food and tastings and that kind of thing into the residential setting? And so we kind of tried to figure out how we could establish some traditions, and 2 traditions that we started as a family were a monthly cookie delivery, where we would either bake or get cookies from the dining facility and take them around to all the residents in our community and kind of check in on them and see how they were doing. And the other tradition that we started was a monthly kind of international dinner, where we invite students into our home and we would have an international themed a dinner for them, where they get to taste food from Morocco or Ethiopia or Indian food or something like that. And so these partnerships that we established very early on, for example, for this one with dining, were really, really crucial to the success of our stay in residence. So, first we talked about the engagement. The second part of our vision is really collaboration. And the third part is really looking at both the research, trying to talk more about the research and give very concrete examples of lived experiences that we have with the students. And so, one of the fun things I think in this book that it offers, and Jennifer's going to talk about this a little bit later, are each chapter opens with a vignette, which is, a story that's written for the most part by a faculty member about some sort of lived experience that they've had. But these lived experiences, I think that we can have as faculty members really allow readers to reflect and find ways to apply whatever these experiences are to their own setting. And so they can be as simple as, buying a few bars of chocolate and having a chocolate tasting, have students taste for different flavors of the chocolate. In one of these pictures, we're having a cheese tasting, and students are writing down kind of what they're experiencing as they taste different cheese and the pairing that goes with them. And so they can be as simple as that, or they could be more complex discussions, like, talking about tenure and promotion and what kinds of things need to happen for the faculty members in terms of preparing for that while taking on this kind of a role. So lived experiences can be simple, they can be more complicated, but they're experiences that really need to be discussed and that we need to reflect on a little bit more. So to summarize, I think that, our vision for this book is, to reach faculty, whether they're new faculty and residents, whether they're faculty with a role in living learning communities, whether they're seasoned faculty who have been in residence for a while, or whether they're housing or professionals who are working with faculty, they're graduate students or undergraduate students that have a role with faculty, administrators who are working with faculty. I think that that this book really offers ideas for engagement, for collaboration, and for partnerships, and offers ideas for lived experiences.
I think this is perfect, because we have some faculty and residents at UNCG. And one of the first things they asked me is like, do you have a list of things that we can do or examples? And there's very little literature. Now we have something I could say, hey, this is a great opportunity for you to dive deep in and get some ideas of how you can partner with us and be engaged with our students. So this is lovely. I can't wait to dive in with our faculty. Can you all explain how you decided to organize the faculty factor? And for those who are looking to purchase this book, what do they expect, or what can they expect to see?
Yeah, so I'll talk a little bit about it, and I'll actually open with a story that ties into my own experience raising a family on a campus. So as we've mentioned, and as we'll talk about a little bit later, there are so many different ways to be involved with LLCs. And so in the organization of the book, we definitely dive into the most extreme version, which is being a family in residence, but we definitely thought a lot about faculty who might be involved at lower levels, which might include visiting events, just as a participant, maybe leading a one-off type of event. So to open up, I wanted to tell a story about one of the really cool benefits of being in the job for 6 years. I lived on campus at Elon University. I'm an English faculty member. And when I moved to North Carolina, I'd previously been in the Seattle area. I moved as a single mother to my then 4 or 5-year-old son. And when he moved on campus with me at the very beginning of the year, we had our neighborhood welcome, where it was the very first day students moved in on campus. And there was a night where the faculty would introduce themselves, the staff would introduce themselves, the RAs would do a lot of spirit activities. And so I remember when my son Nikita was like, 4.5, bringing him on stage and him just being so frightened that he hid behind that podium. And I ended up going over and grabbing him and like holding him up almost like Simba in The Lion King, where he like kind of squirmed, but then eventually kind of waved and ran away. This picture is from, I think, 4 years later, where you see him in the very front, sitting right up on the ledge with the RAs, pointing out at students, and he stayed up front the entire event. Because in those years, as I think 8 or 9-year-old at that point, he felt comfortable with those college students. And so doing this work is not only so valuable for faculty, but it's also really valuable for the partners, for the kids, even for the pets who get to grow up with so many people surrounding them. So really, as Lara said, we wanted to bring the stories, the how-tos, and the very real experiences into the book, but also to marry that with practice. I just left a faculty workshop with some faculty at Elon, and they were like, we don't know much about this work. We're excited to see this book because we get to see the theory. We get to see what the student affairs professionals are doing. And so very much we organized the book and thought about the book as sort of meeting multiple audiences. So part 1 of the book ultimately is looking at sort of the structural conditions at an institution that allow for successful faculty-student engagement. So things like what type of administrative support within senior staff is really helpful and how that trickles down into the types of incentives, understanding tenure and promotion, understanding the things that faculty specifically need to be able to do the work and the ways that those incentives, rewards, and recognition make sense within the faculty reward structure, which is a little bit different than the way staff at a university might work. So thinking about, as they say, the 3-legged stool of promotion and tenure, teaching, service, and research, and all the different ways that LLC work can actually meet all 3 of those categories. And also understanding that faculty recognition may look different than staff recognition. So all of those conditions, all of those models are what part 1 is really looking at. Part 2 is looking very deeply at sort of the day-to-day work and how different types of partnerships, whether it's the faculty or the sort of student affairs, academic affairs partnerships, are so essential in the communication and the teamwork that works between them, as well as, how faculty write curricula for LLCs and for linked courses, as well as partnerships with parts of campus that one might not initially think of. Lara mentioned dining, working with campus rec, working with campus police, working with the technology office to ensure that family members are supported if they're living in, or your initiative to show a film actually works when you show up to the event. So all of the different types of partnerships that make the job possible. And then part 3 is really looking at the lived experiences of faculty and residents specifically, but there are a lot of takeaways from that section that really are valuable for any faculty member. So for example, there's a chapter on work-life balance. And I hear from a lot of faculty who are LLC advisors and maybe live out, they still have challenges figuring out how to come to work and engage with students in the evenings and on weekends, and how to talk about that with their families. Or bringing family, pets, etc. to events applies to not only those living in, but also those elsewhere. So that's the sort of overall organization of the book. But each chapter has a sort of template and a pattern to it that we created in order to support the authors, to cover, what we imagine that our audience would be looking for, and also to make it easier for readers to follow. So we open with a vignette, which, as Lara said, is either a faculty or a staff member, depending on the chapter, the perspective of the chapter, but definitely somebody in the field doing the work, sharing a story that relates to the topic of the chapter. Then there's typically a literature review that covers key research related to the topic at hand. And then there's that turn to practice that very much says, what is the model, or how can people do this and apply this to the job at their institution? So each chapter follows this pattern and is accompanied on the book series. The Elon Center for Engaged Learning book series has a website that we'll show you a little bit later, and there are reflection questions and additional resources available there. The goals, and here's the link right to it. The goals are that the book is easily readable, that whether or not you are a undergraduate or graduate student kind of diving into higher education, or you are a seasoned administrator or someone who's been in the field for a long time, that it would be very easy to jump in, understand what's going on, and that the takeaways would be really obvious. But at the same time, we definitely imagined that groups like y'all might bring this back to your institution and have reading groups, and that each chapter could be standalone for groups that may be able to use those resources. So we imagine that some of you will read this book cover to cover and find a lot of use within it. But then we also imagine that particular chapters may be something that resonates with a book group on a campus, and then you can use the supplementary resources. And as we mentioned, absolutely our audience is at the forefront, faculty, because that's one that hasn't had a lot of books or articles written for their perspective, but at the same time, they are so deeply in partnership with student affairs professionals that there's a lot of talking across the divide within the book, as well as the administrators, both in student affairs and academic affairs, who are really advocating for this work to happen. And then finally, students are very much a part of these conversations. At Elon, we have graduate apprentices working in neighborhood offices. We have senior RAs who are doing the work. And so we imagine that those students would definitely want to be included. Finally, the book covers and really advocates for 3 areas of growth. So these are the areas that we would actually love to hear feedback, and we can imagine that this would be some of the conversation today. But the areas that the book really advocates for identifying and sort of looking at the next direction is, first of all, looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion and supporting new majority students. Chapter 1 talks a lot about who those new majority students are and really how faculty and student engagement initiatives might speak to those students and support really the future of residential college students. Additionally, thinking about faculty recruitment, as we know, faculty students often appreciate mentors who look like them or have had experiences like them, and yet the faculty pipeline still is predominantly white. And so really thinking about faculty recruitment to support faculty of color, faculty with different backgrounds, faculty with non-traditional families, to really not only recruit, but also support and mentor those faculty in the role and adapt the roles if needed to be supportive of those faculty, because the students need to see and be mentored by faculty in those types of roles. And then finally, thinking about LLCs in general and the types of LLCs, whether it's first gen LLCs or LLCs for target student populations, and thinking about the faculty, how the faculty engage with them within. And so that's really our big overview of what we aimed to do with the book. And now we'd love to talk about the content.
Yes, I appreciate that. Appreciate both of you sharing in detail of how you all have created and the outline of this book. We do have a comment. I wanted to tell the audience that you all are welcome to write any questions that have come up for you all in the chat. I'll be making sure to take a look at that. So if there's anything that pops up or sparks a question, please don't hesitate to write that. But I think we have a question comment in the chat that I would love to share. So as you were speaking, Jennifer, they said that they need advice on how to move the needle on creating the condition for successful faculty student engagement, particularly as it relates to service with the tenure and promotion process. Yeah. Do you have anything you want to share to those pieces?
I'm happy to answer since I just went through the tenure and promotion process. So it's something that's been very much on my mind because sort of for personal reasons, being in the role as a pre-tenured faculty member, being acutely aware of what counts and how it counts. I think what I have noticed is that there are many types of faculty-student engagement, and some are validated by the institution and some are not. And so to give the example of Elon University, we have the live-in faculty roles, who are faculty in residence and faculty directors. Those are roles which are there's a search for them. So they very much have a title, they have prestige. They are still primarily recognized as service, but there is an openness at the institution to talk about them in your teaching section of your annual review and in your teaching section of your promotion and tenure file, especially because there's a course reassignment that's affiliated with that. So talking about how many students you're in contact with, how you mentor them, the type of programming you're bringing that has an academic spin to it, creating that space within the teaching section of a tenure and promotion portfolio. Talking about it in the role of service, I tended to talk about administrative work. So ways that I worked with colleagues at the institution, whether they were other faculty or staff. That's what I tended to reserve for the service section of my portfolio. And then Elon is a place that really values scholarship of teaching and learning. And so if a faculty member is at an institution where there is a lot of attention to scholarship of teaching and learning, or if a department really recognizes scholarship of teaching and learning, there are definitely ways that faculty can pilot initiatives and then research them. So an example could be working in a Women in STEM LLC and then doing SOTL research on and then publishing it within STEM journals on how they engaged women within the field, and then maybe track their progress through the degree program. So that's something that we have seen done, and that seems to track for a lot of institutions. Every university has a different promotion and tenure process. And so some it's at the departmental level, some it's at the institutional level, some really want to see you publishing like in your field. But if in your field can include pedagogy, then I think there's a really great opening for looking at that faculty student engagement work and really tacking it onto teaching, tacking it onto research, and then thinking about only the parts that fall under service. Like I said, for me, it was the administrative work, and I very quickly moved the other work into those other segments. Lara, you are at a different style of institution.
Right. So I'm coming from the University of South Carolina, I came into this position as a full professor. So my situation was a little bit different than Jennifer's. But I did want to share a couple of things that I have found helpful to do in the process. Each year at the end of my kind of term as the faculty principal of the residential college in which I was living, I asked my superior in academic affairs to write a letter that I could give to my department chair, kind of detailing the work that I had done, so that that was documented and could be placed in my official file within my home department. And I think it's really important to have that ongoing communication between, because, as a faculty member living in a residence, I'm kind of between departments. I had, 3 bosses that I was reporting to. I had my boss in my department, and then I had someone in student affairs and someone in academic affairs. And so for me, it was really important, even though I had tenure and was promoted a few years before taking this position, I wanted to make sure that my work was documented and accounted for within my own apartment. So they just didn't think I was, over in a residence, not doing anything, right? It was important for them to know what I was doing and that everything was going along in a way that I wanted it to go. The other thing is we had many faculty and staff associates that worked with our residents, and they would do activities with our students and get involved in a variety of ways, even though they weren't living in. And so what we would try to do at the end of each year was write a letter thanking them for their interaction, their engagement, and their service with our students. And we tried to get those signed by someone in the provost office, and then would mail those letters with a copy to their departments or deans, so that that was very clear that we were recognizing and valuing their time and their service and their commitment to the students in our residence. So I think, those 2 things that I was able to share for you from a different perspective than Jennifer can be helpful depending on the situation of the faculty at your institution and depending on what kind of institution you're working with.
Awesome. Thank you both. I have a quick follow-up question from the discussion that we were having. How can we as faculty and staff contribute to building a more equitable, inclusive community for students to thrive? And do you all have any examples that you can share with us on this call?
Right. So I could maybe start out, if we want to go to the next slide. I think one of the things that I would recommend starting with is trying to figure out who are your residents. If you're a faculty member, you're working with the community, maybe you're living in, maybe you're not living in, but you do have residents that you're accounting for. And, who are the residents? But maybe even a better question to ask is who is not applying to be in your residential college or in your community, and why aren't they applying? But Jennifer and I, as I mentioned before, we were involved with a group who did some research on thriving in communities. And so some of our research pointed to some key groups that were perhaps not thriving as much as other groups. And so we found that, there was some findings for first generation students, maybe Black men, Asian students. And so it's looking into maybe these groups a little bit more. And as Jennifer mentioned earlier, finding some mentors to work with these students. It's also important to kind of rethink the way we're doing activities sometimes, and to look at the activities that we're doing and who's attending those activities. If we find that, for example, we're not getting a lot of men coming to our activities, maybe we need to think about changing up the types of things that we're offering within our community to make our communities a little more inclusive and to really focus on equity a little bit more. Another idea that we had is adapting faculty recruitment and those processes to be more inclusive of different types of faculty members. As Jennifer mentioned earlier, we see the typical faculty member in residence is white and female. And so, we need to be opening up and thinking about that during our application processes and interview processes so that we can be more inclusive of the faculty that we are having lead some of the communities. And I think one thing that I found to be really helpful in looking at my community and trying to figure out, who's part of my community and who's participating is the data. And so one of the things that we do at the University of South Carolina is we have a swipe machine where students swipe their cards or enter their information each time they attend an activity. And if we go to the next slide, I'm able to see a visual as the faculty member of my community about, the number of events we've offered, who's attending the events, who our high engaging residents are, who our low engaging residents are, and then, the events that are attended by the residents. And so it's great to know who our high engagers are. We know they have no trouble coming and participating in our events, but perhaps more important is who are our low engagers, and why are they not attending events? Is it the type of events we're offering? Is some other issue going on? And so, as the faculty principal in my community, I really made an effort to kind of really engage with those who are on our low engaging list and try to figure out what's going on. How can we get them to more events? How can I be a better mentor to those specific groups? And so I find that if we're able to collect data about our events and about our community, it's really helpful to me and to the staff of our residents to kind of make decisions that can be very intentional about who we are trying to engage within our community.
So another way that we have really found to support students thriving, as well as in a lot of ways, the faculty thriving in the work, is through partnerships. So not only creating partnerships with folks around campus spreads out the work, but it also creates a lot of different contact points for students to become engaged. So on this slide, there are a few different images that really demonstrate sort of the breadth of programs and ways that you can create these different opportunities for both students, but also campus partners to get involved. So on the far left side, you see a cheese tasting, kind of like Lara described. The International Living Learning Community at Elon did a cheese festival. They did it out on the basketball courts. And they worked with Elon Dining to come up with a bunch of local cheeses along with pairings of vegetables, olives, fruit, breads, etc. That was a really fun way for the chefs to put on their creative hats and put together this program. But they didn't just stop there. They also reached out to the library. I find that librarians are often an underutilized resource because librarians are educators. 100% they identify as educators, but they're not always in classrooms. And so they really, I find, jump at the opportunity to come to events to engage with students, whether it's visiting a class or coming to an event like this, where they were able to put together a book truck where they had different, everything from children's books to academic books that tied in with cheese. They folded papers to be little bookmarks that look like Cheez-Its. They just had so much fun collaborating and bringing together ideas for this cheese festival. So that's an example of one partnership where it was sort of like, and in brainstorming the event and snowballing, who could we get into touch with, really created a cool collaboration. The second image in the middle is of some of the Elon chefs teaching students. In this case, it was macaroni and cheese. The chef Candace was famous for her mac and cheese. And so within one of the kitchens in one of the residence halls, she did a workshop on making it. And the students were able to adapt it to kind of create their own versions with their own add-ins. And then they had a tasting to see who had the best mac and cheese. So again, it was utilizing the resources that ultimately Aramark was able to kind of bring to the table, as well as some funds from the LLC to bring in a group of students who maybe don't want to go out to an event, but do want to stay in for the event. The third column is an event that, for me, reflecting upon it, it was sort of both a success and also a failure at the same time. And finding a way to read it was in reflecting on it, I think shows the complexities of this work. So we were having one of our monthly neighborhood dinners, which was a chance for students to come together and learn about the theme of the year. The theme was related to being global. So the neighborhood is the global neighborhood, and we were looking that year at being local. And so we invited representatives from indigenous tribes within the region to come and sit at tables and talk about some of the contemporary issues facing whether it was their sort of community or their organization. Some of them were for education organizations, some were advocacy, et cetera. And on the one hand, it was this really amazing room to be in because we tapped into so many community partners and we brought a lot of faculty and staff to the table, but not a lot of students attended. And so reflecting on it, it was like, okay, well, we had an attendance of like 10 or 15 students. We put so much effort, so many folks came to visit. But over time, we realized that the 10 students who came had really, really deep, meaningful conversations. Indigenous students who came were seen. There was a couple Asian Pacific Islander students who came and they were like, wow, this isn't necessarily my cultural background, but having these deep conversations was so valuable. In addition, the faculty and staff meeting the community partners in the room was also so meaningful. And so it was a good reminder that some of the metrics, kind of like Lara talked about, thinking about attendance, really important to know who's engaging, but also a reminder that sometimes having a really deep conversation or something that is tailored towards a particular group of students where it might be meaningful for a smaller group is also really important, both for sort of the involvement and the happiness and the joy of those students, but also for creating the community that you want to see on campus. And before I toss it back to Lara, I wanted to point out one table that we have in the introduction of the book that is sort of a reminder of the many different ways faculty, and this is faculty in particular, can be involved in this work. We often, to go back to that tenure and promotion conversation, we often recognize formal roles like academic advisors or academic leaders, maybe even curriculum designers, although I think there's more people at the curriculum design team than those who get credit. But outside of those formal roles who are recognized and have like a line on the CV, there are so many other roles that can be recognized, often in the ways that Lara described with a thank you letter. I love the CCing the department chair or the dean, CCing an administrator to show the ways that faculty and staff serve as an experiential learning guide, serve as a guest speaker, come in and informally serve as a role model or participant. Just being present is so valuable, kind of like that dinner that felt like it was not a success, but actually was because of the conversations. Similarly, those representative roles where you're speaking on an advisory board is so important to developing the future and troubleshooting challenges within these spaces. And I think Lara is going to talk for a moment about some of the engaged learning that she's done.
Right. I think that, it's interesting to look at this table now and think, well, I think, as I was a faculty member living in residence, I probably played all of these roles at some point, sometimes multiple roles. One that kind of spoke to me was the experiential learning guide. And coming from my background, which I'm a professor of French and applied linguistics at the University of South Carolina, I wanted to figure out how I could bring some more a different kind of experience to the students and take them, something typical that I would do as a professor of French would be short-term study abroad trips. And so I was trying to think, well, how could I do this for my living and learning community to, kind of take them to experience and out of the classroom learning and combine that with, learning beyond the classroom and learning within the classroom. And so we decided to start a short-term study abroad program to Morocco. And so this was, a project where I began by doing a site visit myself, just to kind of see if this might be a good place to take students. I had a lot of experience traveling in Europe, some experience traveling in Africa, but had never been to Morocco before. After my site visit there, I was convinced that this was a place that I thought would be a great place to take students, just because of the cultural diversity there. It's not somewhere where you would typically be able to just, go to without a guide or without a group. And so we worked with our community to kind of build this project. Took about a year of planning to find a provider who would help us plan the itinerary and the places we wanted to go to, and then to recruit students. But the first year that we ran this project, we had 16 students who were eager to travel to Morocco, and it was a great way to bond as a community. It was a great way to experience learning together in a classroom setting. So I taught a 3-credit course with my assistant principal during the spring semester. And so that course allowed us to really just help students to understand Morocco better as a country, as a place to go, as its culture, its languages, I should say. And students were able to also engage in some independent learning through some small research projects. And so then we were able to go on site after the semester finished. We left for Morocco, spent about 15 days there exploring the country together as a group. And I think it only strengthened our bonds as a community. As one of the students, I put a quote there from one of the students, it created a stronger bond with fellow Preston residents, which I loved. So we were, together a lot, 24/7. We had great experiences together, and it was just a really, really interesting and fun way to kind of mesh that within and beyond the classroom learning in an experiential setting.
Yeah, to piggyback on that, I think it's really important to figure out what the right kind of engagement for you is. I'm not a professor of French, and I don't know that I'm ready to bring a group of students to Morocco, but that's okay, right? So figuring out what is within your scope and also where your interests lie. So some of the programs that were totally low key that really worked for my family, in addition to things like tastings out on the global quad, I did a bagel brunch for students, partially because there are no good bagels in Elon and I like bagels. And I had also, in my adult life learned how wonderful a bagel with lox and capers could be. And so bringing things like that to students where it's like, come over to my house, watch, come learn how to make a really good bagel, try some fruit you've never tried, hang out with a family. The picture on the left is my son playing Mario Kart with students and just kind of hanging out became this really wonderful refuge for students on Sunday mornings when our dining hall was not open, and also an opportunity for me to have these really low-level interactions. And, the faculty director living in Global Now doesn't do bagel brunches. He does something entirely different that works for his family. in the process of editing the book, and as we were turning towards the conclusion, we were thinking about how do we wrap this up and like, what's our final word? What is some of the last advice we wanted to leave? And one of the things that we sort of arrived upon is that not only are those different roles available that we presented in the introduction, but also anyone serving in any role has a lot of different ways they can think about and figure out what they are comfortable with. So as they think about authentic engagement, there's a lot of different ways to do it. So we ended up with this matrix where sort of professional engagement or like formal engagement on one side, informal engagement on the other side, and then professional and personal. Some faculty may not want to present too much of their personal life. They may feel like living in residence or coming in on the weekends is not for them. And that's fine. We respect and we understand that at different points in their life, or different faculty have different boundaries. But at the same time, if someone wants to engage with students professionally, most of the time, there are still formal and informal ways they can do that. And those formal ways are sometimes a great entry point, but the informal can be a really fun way for students to see that a faculty member is a human and that they have all of these interests outside of their professional interests. Similarly, that we can have personal interests that are more related to maybe our own identities or our hobbies outside of our discipline, but there are formal ways that you can do that and also informal ways. For example, I often forget about formal personal ways. I tend to swing between like formal professional and informal personal, and remembering that there's those other two sides on the matrix can be a really great way to really generate ideas. And so for faculty who are thinking about this work, this could be a really great exercise to just hand out this table and have faculty fill out and brainstorm all the possible things and then circle a few of the things that they might actually want to try out in whatever role that they are interested in participating in. That kind of covers, I think, our thoughts on thriving and DEI in the role.
Yes, I appreciate this table, and I appreciate you all going a little bit deeper about your experiences. And what I loved about the vignettes throughout the book too, it gives that personal piece that maybe we weren't considering or had no idea were happening. I do have a question before we go in towards the end of our chat. What I love about this book as well is that you can, anyone from just starting an LLC program or, they're veterans in the LLC or LOPs. But I wanted to follow up. One of my favorite chapters in the book was starting with a shared approach. Mm-hmm. Can you all briefly share, for those who are just starting on the LLC journey, what does it mean by starting with a shared approach, and what does that look like, and what are some challenges with coming up with a common vision with the academic side of the house?
Well, I can say, I think I saw that Terry Garrett, one of the authors, is in the audience today. So absolutely, the vision for that approach was created by our fantastic colleagues at Baylor. Ryan Eric's no longer at Baylor, but Ryan, Leah Duncan, and Terry Garrett did a really great job of articulating what a shared approach could be. And I highly encourage folks to take a look at their model. But I think for me, in practice, it's always that every person involved in a living learning community, including the students, have expertise. They have experiences, they have wisdom, they have curiosity, and they have needs. And when you bring together all of those things, and you listen to each other and you try to build a program that validates those experiences and meets those needs and engages everyone in the room, that's when you really have that magic for success. And so it really takes valuing all the partners and the listening and the wisdom to kind of know that together it will work out.
And I think that, another chapter in the book, the title of the chapter is It Takes a Village. Mm-hmm. And I think that's so true. it's a shared approach, obviously, but it also takes a village to make things happen. You're, as a faculty member, when you come into a community, you're not just working by yourself. As academics, we tend to work by ourselves. We write articles, we do research, but it's, trying to almost rethink and retrain yourself as a faculty member to work with so many other partners and to share these, the successes, the oversights, the resources, the vision with so many people and getting their input and communicating, that it really does take a village to make a successful community. And I think, that's a beautiful thing that, you may not realize as a faculty member going into this kind of a position, but it's something that you learn as you grow and as you finish up your position.
So thank you both so much. As we start to wrap up, we have about 10 minutes left. Is there any additional information that you want to share with us for those who are looking to dive deeper into this text?
Yeah, so sort of quickly, a reminder and a plug for the most recent issue of Talking Stick, which not only has an interview with Lara and myself, but has an excerpt by Rishi and his daughter, Lily, Rishi Siriam, on their experiences as family in residence. And so yet again, really thinking about the whole person, whether or not it is a whole person, living in with their family and making that very visible. We also really encourage institutions to think about families very holistically, that families can be multi-generational. Families can include single individuals and their fantastic community of family who may not live with them, friends who are like family, their pets, and that policies for faculty and residents should really be thoughtful about the sort of unconventional and wonderful families that we can have today. So that's something that we definitely encourage y'all to take a look at, not only the book, but also, the opportunities within Talking Stick. We also, that's just a quick overview of the index. You all can grab it if you take a look at the book itself. So two things we wanted to point out. One is that we have a order code that you can see on the screen right now. Feel free to write it down or screenshot it. I would encourage you, if you're going to order the book, to order it, I think, before the end of June. Stylus, the publisher of the book, has been sold to Routledge Education, so there will be a migration over. There shouldn't be an interruption in ordering, but there may be an interruption in that code. So please use it as soon as possible. And then the final thing we wanted to point out, which is again where you can get an index of the book, is the resource. The best way to find the web resource really is to just Google Elon Center for Engaged Learning Faculty Factor. And this is where you will find all of the organization, abstracts of the chapters, the author information, and then resources. There are reflection questions written by the authors for each chapter to accompany each chapter, so that if you do sit down with a reading group, you can use those as a springboard for discussion questions. Or if you want to read the chapters and then reflect upon them for your own professional development, those resources will be really valuable.
And if you aren't able to purchase the book right now, this is a great free resource for anyone who wants to get a little bit more information. And we hope this will just kind of whet your appetite for the whole book, and that you'll go in and look that up after. But as Jennifer said, there's great questions for discussion and additional information that each chapter includes that will give you some more examples and ideas for engagement and for partnerships and for collaboration.
A lot of several of the chapters have like templates for doing the work or models that are blanked out that you can then use to fill in. So the chapter authors were really thoughtful about creating resources that you all could take and use to do the work. They really came from that turn to practice.
Amazing. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Laura. I appreciate you all sharing your knowledge, your experience, and sharing this wonderful resource I believe I'm going to ask James to come back on. I think we have a surprise.
Yes, we do. As promised, we one copy of the book has been generously donated that we will be able to give away to one of the attendees. So we have pulled a list of the attendees, we have randomized them, and we're going to ask Laura, I think you were the one who drew the straw, for you to pick a number between 1 and 44.
So I will pick number 27.
And Meredith right now is frantically counting and looking at that.
I am. Number 27 is Abir. So Abir, I will send you an email to get your address from you.
Fantastic. So thank you so much to Laura and Jennifer and Keeyana for leading this discussion. I appreciate the questions that came in through the chat. I'm sure there's a lot of other thoughts. Some direct messages came in talking about how they're looking forward to taking this book back to work within their departments and make plans moving forward. And again, I can't recommend this book enough. I think it is a wonderful combination of motivational and inspiring to want to be able to get the faculty further involved and to further enrich your living learning communities, but also being very honest about what the considerations are for both the housing department and for the faculty members, and recognizing that these are human beings that are involved with this and what goes into making the choice to get involved. So with that, I will say this has been recorded. We will get this posted up on our YouTube page as quickly as possible so that we can share it out. And then you can also go back and look at it further if you want to share it with your campus. So one more time, thank you to all of our participants. Thank you all for attending. This was fantastic to have this number of people. And I hope you all have, as we near the end of the academic year, I hope you have a great, easy transition. Thank you very much.